Over the years, I have shared a lot of what I've learned about connecting with the divine essence of the universe and channeling divine power through our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs out into the world around us to manifest our desires into reality. Along the way, I have shared a number of stories about how I've used this information in my own life to manifest things for myself and for others close to me. Some of these stories that I've shared include some things that some people might consider to be impossible. Things like influencing the weather for a special event, or to pick a certain number of hours in a temp job where I had absolutely no control over anything in the business, and yet I was able to get within a half an hour of whatever number I had picked for that particular week. I have recently realized how easy it would be for someone to hear these stories and come to the conclusion that somehow I might be special. I might have been born under a lucky star, or maybe I have some natural talent or ability that makes it easy for me to manifest into my life. And maybe, just maybe, I can do these things and you can't. My intention for this presentation is to pull back the curtain and let you see that the great and powerful wizard is just as human as you are. And if you're willing to keep a secret, there's nothing special about me, except maybe the fact that I never really gave up. So in order for me to accomplish this goal, I need to step out of my comfort zone. And I need to tell a few new stories about the low points of my life, some of the things that I'm not so proud about. Hopefully, by my sharing these stories, you will have an understanding that if there's anything that I've been able to do, you can do just as much, if not more. It is also my intention that at the end of this presentation, I will give you a easy ritual, simple ritual that you can use anywhere, anytime to increase your confidence, your faith, your trust in the universe to manifest miracles into your life. So, let's get started. The beginning of my life was spectacularly uneventful. No bright star shining over my head, no crowds of people awaiting the arrival of a new Messiah, no one marveling at the wisdom of a child. My life started out like anybody else's. In my case, that was on May 31st, 1966, 2:32 in the afternoon in Carbondale, Michigan. Or not Michigan, Illinois. Sorry, I've been in Michigan too long. But I promise not to go into too much detail. I'm only going to cover the highlights that pertain to the points that I need to make in this presentation. And the first highlight that I need to cover is in my high school years. And back at that time, I was the nerd. I was always reading, I was studying, I was focused on getting good grades in school. I did have a few friends, but nobody would consider me a social butterfly. And for me at that time, this was a problem because I wanted to be more engaged with other people. I wanted to be more outgoing. I wanted to be more social. But for whatever reason, I just could not get through the thick wall that I had built around myself. I remember being in my room at night, safe within the four walls of my room, and dreaming about how I would choose to be different the next day, how I would choose to be more outgoing, how I would choose to engage in the conversations that people were having around me, how I would choose to be more confident. And yet, the next day when I got to school, I would shrink within myself, afraid to step out of my shell and be different than what I had been. I had this thought in my head that everyone knew me as the shy and timid guy who was always reading. And I had this mistaken idea that if I chose to approach people differently, they might ridicule me. And For most of my life, I was deathly afraid of confrontation, and I would avoid it at all cost. Also in my high school years, I got interested in ESP and developing my psychic abilities. And one of the things that you can do when developing psychic abilities is get a deck of cards, just a normal deck of cards, 52 cards in the deck, and shuffle the cards together. And then you try to guess what suit is the next card in the deck, whether it's a clubs, a spade, a heart, a diamond. And since there's only 4 suits in the deck, you have a 25% chance of being right. So if you went through 52, most likely you would get 13 of them correct, even with no psychic abilities whatsoever. If your psychic abilities are working well, then you can get 30%, 40%, 50%, maybe even more. But 25% is what random chance would be. And when I did that exercise, I might have got 10% right, maybe 15. Chance was 25. Good would have been 30, 40, 50%. I was on the other side of that. I obviously was connecting in with something because it was not the same 25%. But instead of leaning towards the positive, the success side, I went the opposite way. I was leaning towards failure. And that leaning towards failure was a constant problem over and over and over in my life. So that was a pattern that had developed fairly early on. And after high school, one of the good things that actually did happen for me, I won a full tuition scholarship to DeVry University to study electrical engineering. I wanted to learn how to design computers, and whatever came about, I was good. I had good grades in school. I had made the right application. I wrote a paper to get the scholarship. I actually won the scholarship. So that was a good thing. However, my dad gave me some advice that if I took the student loans and saved them, didn't spend them on the books and the supplies and the rent and everything else that you needed to pay for it in order to go to school, if I saved that and applied it towards a car, then I could actually get a car for lower interest rate than what interest rates were at that time. So I tried to listen to his advice. I got a part-time job. I was working for Wendy's. And part-time, for whatever reason, ended up being 40 hours a week. And again, I was afraid of confrontation. I did not feel capable of going up to the boss and saying, hey, please schedule me for less hours. I need to focus on school. I just simply accepted whatever they gave me. So trying to go to school full-time, trying to work full-time, that didn't work very well for me. And there were quite a few mornings when the alarm clock would go off. I'd turn the alarm clock off. I'd intend to be getting up, but I'd fall back asleep. And then when I did wake up and I realized what time it was, it's like, oh, it's too late to get there on time for school. And then I made a series of bad choices. Rather than go to school late and face the imagined ridicule of other students, I decided to stay home and not go to school that day. Well, after you skip too many days of school, even a straight A student, which is what I was in high school, will eventually get lower and lower grades, and I eventually failed. I failed in that endeavor, in an endeavor that I should have been ideally qualified for. So I failed. At the time, the girlfriend I had at the time, we ended up, because I couldn't stay at the school apartments, we found a friend of hers who had a room for rent. We rented that room. I ended up getting a job for UPS, loading in the trucks. And that job was just more than I can handle. The boxes are coming in on a conveyor into the truck. I've got to grab the box off the conveyor. I've got to look at the address and remember like 2 pages worth of addresses of what goes into the truck, try to remember if this matches one of those, load it into the truck in a way that's not going to fall apart by the time it gets to the destination, grab another box, go back and forth, and it was just too much for me to handle. I couldn't keep up. And so I got fired. So I failed in school. I failed at that job because of the situation that I was in. We were renting a room at a friend's house. The part of the story that I haven't yet mentioned is that my girlfriend at the time and the friend of hers that we were staying with were cocaine addicts. And they spent a lot of time with friends of theirs who doing this thing, and I didn't judge them. It's like, okay, if that's what you guys want to do, that's fine. I don't really have any interest in doing that. So I remember one evening, I'm sitting in the room on the floor, pile of papers around me with notes on this computer project that I had in my head for quite a few years. And I'm looking at this, thinking about, okay, how can I make this better? How can I make this better? I'd studied computer design on my own for quite a number of years, so I was working on that. And at one point, I remember leaning back, looking at the papers and thinking, what am I doing here? There's no way that I'm going to be able to complete this project. My life is falling apart. I have no idea if I even have a future. And because that thought went through my mind, that fished out this other thought that said, you know what? This is the reason why some people commit suicide. I probably thought about it for 2 or 3 seconds, but then it's like, no. I'm too afraid of that. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. I'll just stick it out. But at that moment, because everything had been falling apart in my life, I accepted this idea that my life was just simply going to be one struggle after another. I was a failure. That's who I was. That's the life that I was going to be living. And because I had accepted that idea as if it were a fact, that was my firm belief about who I was and what my life was going to be about. That belief caused the dominoes to start falling. One thing fell after another, after another, after another. Obviously, a few dominoes fell before that point. That was just one in the series. But the dominoes kept falling until a point when one of my famous stories starts out, I was homeless, I had lost everything. And actually, I guess I should mention that after failing at UPS and that whole thing, I did move back with my parents. And I stayed there for a period of time. And while I was there, my dad made it perfectly obvious that he really did not approve of my being a failure. And he was right. I was a failure. I had completely failed at whatever I was trying to do. And it just felt like insult onto injury, salt in the wound, and all of that. And I mean, he was right, but it was not comfortable for me to be there. And so at one point I decided I was going to leave. I waited till one weekend when they were gone somewhere else. Both mom and dad were gone somewhere else. And I decided, okay, this is my chance. I'm going to leave. I packed a duffel bag and I was gone. And a number of years later, I was reminded, or it was pointed out to me, that happened to be Mother's Day. Another big mistake. Oh well, what's done is done, right? Okay, so lots of mistakes. I was certainly not born under a lucky star. In with all of this, I had been following up on my interest in ESP and developing psychic abilities, and connected with that is the idea of manifesting your desires, prayer, the power of belief, the power of magic, as some people call it. And I was looking into that to find out, is there a way for me to turn this thing around, get the train back on the track, and start moving in a forward direction? Basically, the answer was I tried a lot of different things, failed. There were a number of times when I would try to manifest one thing and I got the exact opposite. And so the idea that I have some natural talent and ability of this, no, not at all. It took me a lot of years before I finally found something that worked. And then here again, that's where it comes in. I ended up being homeless. I'd lost everything. The duffel bag that I'd packed when I left my parents' house, that got stolen at one point. So literally, I had nothing. No house, no car, no friends, no family that I felt that I can contact. No money in my pocket except for a penny that I found in a parking lot as I was walking out of Indianapolis, which that was another experience in itself. There was a time when I was walking through what ended up being the worst ice storm they had for 10 years. Not a fun experience, and I later found out that that was a manifestation when I was reading a fiction book. I had visualized the scene a little too clearly. So that set the stage. That is where I was when I walked into that bookstore that morning after walking the streets all night in the cold, in the winter. And I found what became the most powerful book I'd ever read. Joseph Murphy, The Miracle of Mind Dynamics. The title really grabbed me because after walking the streets all night, going into the bookstore because I just needed a place to get warm, and I had an affinity for books. I still do. You can see the bookshelf behind me. I love books. I felt that the answer had to be in a book somewhere, and I found myself in front of the self-help section. The title grabbed me. I looked at it. On the bottom of the cover, it says there's a 60-second action plan. It's like, hey, that sounds good. So I started looking through the book, and it's talking about the power of belief, the power of choosing to believe that the thing that you would like to experience will actually happen. And there was the 4-step thing. I'll get into that later if you want to. But the basic idea was that I was visualizing there is no power in the universe other than the power of God. God is the only power in the universe. There is no other power. The power of God is within me. The power of God is with me. The power of God is moving through me as the answer, as the solution to the problem, and that problem is made manifest now. And then the last step in there, I guess I'm going through it anyways. The last step is to give thanks for the answer, and not just to get the feeling of gratitude, but also to get the concept, the idea, the belief that it is already done. You give thanks afterwards in most situations. So by giving thanks, we are accepting the fact that it is already done. And so that was the thought process that I went through with that book. And I remember being in that store and the feeling of joy welling up within me that the answer is here. There is a solution. There is an answer, and a weight dropping off of my shoulders that all the problems are going away. And what I was asking for at that time was simple, just enough money to get something to eat and a place to stay. And as some of you already know, the story is later that day as I was walking along on the sidewalk, I found $70, 3 20s and a 10. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, okay, this has to belong to somebody. Somebody is going to claim this money. Where are they? I'm sure they're going to be here any moment. I'm going to make sure they get it. But then I'm sitting there standing there, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, nobody's showing up. And so the only thing I can think of is, thank you, God. Thank you for answering my prayer. This is the manifestation of what I needed. And so it was enough money to rent a room for a week, $45 for a week. It was very rundown place. Not a place that you would really want to be in if you could afford anything else. I got the place, I got a little something to eat, and I went back to the bookstore to buy the book that made it happen, plus 2 others. All from Joseph Murphy. Later on, I did go back and buy more Joseph Murphy books, and if you look at the shelves, this side of this shelf is all Joseph Murphy books. I have 16 of his books right now. There are a few others that I don't yet have, but maybe eventually. So for the week that I was in that rented room, I was reading through these books. I was trying to duplicate that experience. I was trying to manifest more money so that I can get into a better place for a month or more and actually start rebuilding my life. Well, the week went by and I did not produce any more money. So whatever happened that first day, I was unable to reproduce it in the week that followed. However, the thing that taught me was that this stuff can work. And I had read so many stories, not just in the Joseph Murphy books, but in a lot of other books, newspapers. I mean, the stories are everywhere. People's prayers do get answered. And so as the person who was interested in science, the person who loves science and mathematics, I knew that there had to be a way to find out what worked, what didn't work, what were the elements of that first experience that made it work. And so I started a very long journey. I spent 25 years testing every possible thing I could find. I went through and I learned about crystals. I learned about incenses, oils, candles. I learned about chakras, all different ways of doing the chakras, the middle pillar from the Kabbalah. I learned about all that stuff. The Kabbalah is also the foundation for a lot of ceremonial magic that is available out there. I went into the weird areas, the woo-woo areas, and probably the weirdest area that I got into was this Chantomatics book. I was trying anything, and the basic idea behind that was about repeating the power of words and the power of rhyme, and the power of words and rhyme is also part of what Wicca is known for. The spells that they talk about is always said in rhyme. I studied as much as I could about the Rosicrucians and their material, and I continue to study. I study some of the newer materials. Greg Braden, he's got some good materials as well. So, and of course, I went into different religions. Shamanism is just one example. I got into the more scientific stuff, the Silva method. I went straight to the scientist, Dr. Rhine from Duke University, and his studies. Scientists that were studying people that were producing major miracles, manifestations, materializing objects out of thin air, as Sai Baba has been doing or had done for many decades. Max Freedom Long, the science behind the Hawaiian kahunas. And then obviously I went into even harder science, and what they believed was the reason why many tribal cultures were able to heal using the techniques that they used in their cultures. So I covered a lot of ground. I tested all these different things. I tested combinations of things. I tested doing things in different orders. I tested if I wait a week in between this and that, what if there's a time difference? What if I have to go back and go without sleep like I did that one night? What if I have to go without food like I have done a few times? There was a period of 2 weeks that I didn't eat because I couldn't. Fasting, going without sleep, the austerities. I tested all of those in combination with everything else. And as you know, if you've heard any of my other presentations, it's all about the power of belief. And that message is one of the things that Hamid Bey talks about. It's a message that Christ talked about over and over and over again. According to your faith is it done unto you. If you have enough faith, you can say to this mountain, go cast yourself into the sea, and it would be done. The power of faith is what makes all of this work. And as I mentioned, I went through and I studied crystals and candles and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't just study it, I did it. I built my own crystal rod. I bought more professionally built ones. And to be honest, they both worked about the same. I went through and I used the oils, I used the incenses, I used all these different things. And I tested what results I got from those versus what results I got from a variety of other things. And the bottom line was everything worked if I believed in it. If I did not believe in it, then it did not work. That was the bottom line. And so What I would like to give you here at the end of this presentation is a short and easy ritual that you can use anytime, any place to build your confidence, to build your faith, so that that faith can be added to whatever vision that you have that you would like to manifest. And here it is. Okay, I'm going to take a quick breath. Feel like it's been one long sentence since I started. So, okay. I got through that. That's great. Okay. So one of the recent things that I have been learning about, something from Tony Robbins. He has been talking about this for years, and someone at Stanford University, I believe that's the university, 10 years ago made a study that actually proved what he had been talking about all along. That if you want to be confident, if you want to feel confident, one of the ways to make that change is to change the way you present yourself physically, by standing up tall, by putting your shoulders back, by bringing your chin up, by taking up more space, and even getting into what they call the power poses with the hands on the hips, the pose that we normally think of as Superman or Wonder Woman. These types of power poses have been found to change your hormonal balance. By 2 minutes in what they call the power pose, whether it's something like this, if you're sitting back and put your hands behind your head, anything that you would normally do as a super confident person, by replicating those gestures and poses and movements, for just 2 minutes, it changes the chemistry of your body. It increases the hormone that gives you confidence, and it lowers the hormone that causes stress. And so one of the things that we can do is to just simply stand tall. Pretend to be confident, and that will get the ball rolling. Now, while you're doing this, you also want to be visualizing yourself as the center of the universe. The power of God is with you. There is no other power outside of you. And even though this makes absolutely no logical sense, by imagining that, it gives you the right perspective in order to have the belief that makes things work. Now, I do understand there is a difference in logic here, and that, yes, there is power outside of us, but for this moment, for this ritual, we have to imagine there is no other power except for the power of God, which is within me. And by imagining yourself as the center of the universe with everything revolving around you, within that space, also think of the concepts of absolute truth, perfection, eternal reality, divine power, anything that is a firm representation of truth, of reality. And by anchoring in this feeling of truth, into this feeling of power, into this pose of strength, confidence, and power, you are bringing up the feeling of confidence within you. And by imagining confidence, you can manifest an even greater confidence, and it's just like a snowball. It just builds on itself over and over and over again. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It gets more powerful the more you do this. And I would recommend that you do this often. You do it for a few minutes in the morning, do it for a few minutes in the evening, do it for a few minutes whenever you can throughout the day. The more you practice this, the more natural it will feel. And the more natural it feels to be confident, the more often you will feel that confidence. So, just to you know what? I think I'm good, and I just want to double check. I had to close out my screen and see. Anybody want more? Give me a thumbs up if you want me to read through the 4 steps in the Joseph Murphy book that got things started for me. Okay, I see a couple. Okay, tell you what, it will be really quick, so we'll go ahead and do this. This is what made all the difference in my life. This is what turned things around for me. Okay, the 4 steps to praying effectively. The first step is complete allegiance, devotion, and loyalty to the only presence and the only power, God. Now, those of you who have been through unity recognize that as one of the basic principles of unity. God is the only presence and the only power in the universe. This power is within you. It created your body and it can heal it. Second step, you must definitely, absolutely, and completely, he really makes that clear, doesn't he? Refuse to give any power to any external thing or any other power but God. God is the only power. There is no other power. You give no power to the phenomenal world or to any person, place, or thing. There is no power in the rocks. There is no power in the trees. There is no power in other people's thoughts and beliefs. There is no power in a virus. There is no power in anything else except for the power of God, which is within you. This is how to pray effectively. Third step, whatever the problem, difficulty, or sickness may be, turn away from the problem and affirm feelingly and knowingly. There are 2 aspects to that, feelingly and knowingly. God is, and his healing presence flows through me now, healing, vitalizing, and energizing my whole being. God flows through me as the answer, as right action and divine freedom. God is flowing through me as the answer. The 4th step is to give thanks for the happy solution. Rejoice and say, he's got a big thing. I don't think you need the whole thing, but here it is. Father, I thank thee for the perfect answer, and I know it is God in action now. I have mentally touched the border of his garment, and I have pinpointed the whole reaction of the power and the presence of God. It is wonderful. When I did this in that bookstore, that last bit, all I could think of is thank you. It is wonderful. That's the part of that last bit that I focused on at that time. And it is this process by acknowledging God is the only power in the universe, no other power except for God. The power of God is within me and is flowing through me as the answer, and it is done. That is the process that turned things around for me. And I'm just now realizing there's one other point that I really need to stress, and that is this worked when I was at my lowest point. If you are anywhere above where I was at that moment, if you have any degree of confidence in the future, if you have any degree of self-confidence in who you are as a person, you are better off than I was. And if I could do it, so can you. Thank you.